So now, it's the, both for voting issues, they're wanting you to put Hempstead and Waller now, which is one of the bigger issues, but it's always remained.
I'm start with. Yeah, I mean, this action item is just to talk about the reformation of the zip code committee. We can address all of that once the committee is formed and once we start meeting with the committee. We can put them in the direction that we would like them to go. But right now, I think, I guess because there's already the committee, we don't have to take any action. We can just start contacting them and first we have to make sure they all still want to be on the committee. If not, start replacing. So if you would like, I can start reaching out to those people.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Then we'll work together on it, try to form that and see where we are and go forward.
Sounds good.
Okay. Item 3, discuss, consider, and take action on Code of Ordinances, Chapter 1, Section 1.514 on the agenda in terms of when to submit items for the agenda. Councilman Wallace.
Okay, so right now I'm passing down the proposed ideas. So the ideology behind all this is right now currently the agendas are due by Friday, so 72 hours before the city council meeting. But as we know, when it's pretty much posted around Friday at 6 p.m. If we have questions about people or questions for people on the agenda, a lot of times they're home, they're not at work. Then you got the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. So sometimes it could be a rush to try to get in contact with them before the city council meeting. So when I was talking to County Judge Trey Duhan, they get their commission score. They get theirs on Friday, and their commission scores on Wednesday. So they have 2 days. They have the weekend to ask, to formulate the questions. Have that Monday and Tuesday to actually reach out to whoever. So by that Wednesday, it's a very quick and efficient meeting because they know what they want to talk about. So the ideology is to move. I'll actually read it out. So if you look at the part that says agenda, the first top half is what is there. The second part with the highlighted words is the addition to it. So right now, it says all reports, communications, ordinances, resolutions, contract documents, or other matters to be submitted to the council for consideration shall be delivered to the city secretary at least 3 business days prior to each council meeting, whereupon the city secretary shall immediately arrange a list of such matters according to the order of business and furnish each member of the council, the mayor, and the city attorney with a copy of the same at least 24 hours prior to the council meeting and as far in advance of the meeting as time for preparation will permit. So that is what it says now. It's basically at least 3 days is from today, which is Friday. The proposed is all reports, communications, ordinances, resolutions, contract documents, or other matters to be submitted to the council for consideration shall be delivered to the city secretary at least 5 business days prior to each council meeting, whereupon the city secretary shall immediately arrange a list of such matters according to the order of business and furnish each member of the council, the mayor, and the city attorney with a copy of the same at least 5 business days prior to the council meeting, unless it is an emergency. In that case, that information should be given 24 hours prior to the council meeting to the council and as far in advance of the meeting as far in advance of the meeting as time for preparation will permit. City council shall submit their request to the city secretary to be on the agenda at least 7 business days prior to the council meeting. So to summarize all that, it basically states that instead of it being out on Friday, it is out on that Wednesday to give us that Thursday and Friday to ask questions. Unless it is an emergency, they have to be at least 24 hours in advance. And when we want to, city council, we try to submit items, that would be, I meant to put 7. I did not put 6, I put 7. I meant to say 7 business days prior to the council meeting. So if the council meeting is on Monday, that means that the agenda should be out by the Wednesday, and we should have our items in by Monday so everything can get in there efficiently and not last second. I'm gonna say 7.
So,
I actually wrote 6 on it.
I mean, this conversation's come up before, and the issue why we weren't able to do this before is I mean, you compare us to county court, but for one meeting, you know, you're asking, with us meeting twice a month, you're asking us to, you're taking time away from us to actually have the ability to submit information, and two, our staffing, with the time that it takes to put agenda together and all of that, we're giving them a short amount of time for them to actually put the agenda together. So, whereas we've had the issue already of getting things on the agenda, now we're asking them to be able to put it all together with a shorter period of time, which wouldn't be an issue if we just had a person responsible for the agenda, right? So when we have a city secretary who wears multiple hats, asking them to be able to put an agenda together with such with basically 4 or 5 days to actually do it instead of 10, because we're pretty much taking an entire week away from them to actually put that agenda together. I think that's what we come to issues in the past.
Councilman Jones.
I mean, in a sense, I somewhat disagree because right now we're told to send in our reports at least by that Wednesday for them to be prepared by Friday. So all we're doing is asking that we turn in our reports Monday and that the report be finished that Wednesday. So it's still the same turnaround deadline of what we was asking from the start by giving us that Wednesday to turn in a report to have the agenda by Friday.
Well,
I think we're all on the same page with the process, but this is going to restrict us because we're limited in people and staff right now. Right now, there's no minutes in our packet. We can put all the rules that we want. If it's not there, it's not there. And so this is going to put more restrictions, but I don't necessarily know if it's going to get the results that our intention is, because it's going to cut down the days that they have to prepare it. If the city secretary is doing 4 other things, we just talked about all these priorities and all the things. We're missing a city treasurer. We're missing all these things. To now, we're going to put on top of this person. And so I don't necessarily know if we want to restrict maybe a base model of whether it be like the minutes. Like, because I could understand, like, I hate not having the minutes to reflect on what we talked about, and if I get them on Friday and it means on Monday, we can't, there's no connection. But like if we require that we get the minutes, maybe the minutes from the meeting by Wednesday, that's one thing, but to say that they have to have the whole packet ready, I think that's going to prolong us and push us back of how many things we can actually get accomplished moving forward. But it'll streamline it, but again, I don't think we're going to be able to go through the different things we need.
Well, one thing I would like to share with council, because I agree with you, we're all on the same accord of wanting to streamline and get it done. But for example, we're meeting tonight and we report on the prior 2 weeks or so activities. What you'll be saying now is you're going to have 5 days or 1 week worth of activities every 2 weeks to report on. So if there's anything that doesn't make it on the agenda, because the 24 hours don't work, it's a 72-hour minimum required notification for the public. Just as this evening, by putting it out there, people have a right to come and hear about something that might impact them. And so it would have to be, again, I'm with council. You set the policy, and if that be the will of the council, then that's what we'll do. But it will shortchange you all more than I think it does in-house. Councilman Williams in-house.
I don't think at this point in time it's fair to put that kind of imposition on the office, seeing we're in the current situation that we're in. I understand it looks like we have 4 ladies working in that office, but there's a lot going on in that office besides the agenda. And I think we will be selling ourselves short to rush them to have to put an agenda together when if they get sick or something happens, they not here or what have you. I mean, it's stressful right now. And I just don't think right now is the time for us to ask for this kind of change, dealing with what's going on in the office.
I think it's good in theory, we're just not gonna be good in practice.
So, and this is the last time I'm gonna say about it, I think as council, we're not really here to convince each other, we just kind of say what we gotta say, then make a decision from there. The question I had to ask, is whenever we get an agenda that are missing items or anything like that, the question I have to ask, is it that the agenda is taking a long time, or that things are being put on last second, which, you know, when is the first draft made? Because the first draft is made, you know, in a week, but then on that Thursday night or that Friday, you know, right before it's put out there, you have to put it in there. Of course, it can't be completed. So the ideology was to, you know, have all those last second things, know that it's done by that Wednesday. So whenever we see that agenda, we can talk to citizens, we can go by the house, we can talk to the people, we can go by a mayor's office to get clarification. That way on that Monday, you know, because like I said, Saturday and Sunday people are doing things, there is not that rush where when we come up here there's the extra, you know, 30 minutes of discussion whenever we may have had ample time to discuss it beforehand.
Well, remember, the discussion would be potentially a violation of the Open Meetings Act because the public's right to know supersedes me and your ability to just talk because we want clarification. So we can't have those out-of-office meetings on city business without potentially having a walking quorum or getting in trouble. So it's set up now in terms of when the agenda's done. Well, the paperwork it took to get the $742,000 to get the grants, the other stuff, when people have issues, when we've got water leaks and sewer situations, when the computer goes out and we can't function in the office. So we don't have a typical week. We don't have a typical week. So it's just about getting stuff done. If we've got 7 residents that come in here that need our assistance, whatever we're doing, we're dealing with those residents. But the other thing, too, to keep in mind that I paid a little attention to, when the council meetings go 4 and 5 hours, you're tying up people in between phone calls and other city work and helping residents in trying to go through and prepare those meetings minutes. The minutes were actually done, but because of other stuff I was doing, I didn't get to review them to try to make sure they had what you all wanted in them. So Ms. Johnson is going to print them so that you can have them. It's not that they weren't done, it's just that there's a lot of work being done in the city that you just don't see as you look across the counter. Councilman Williams.
That was the thing I was going to say when you mentioned that that was one of the things that Ms. Dickey and Ms. Cortez often said, that the minutes will last for long. In between trying to answer the phone, in between trying to go here, they have to stop the tape, go do something else that they need to do, and then come back, start the tape. And so in doing that, they missed a lot of things because the meetings were so long, and then you come back and you got to kind of start over to make sure that you have everything that was typed up. So that was a little frustrating for both of them to be able to do their regular daily job plus typing the minutes from the tape.
Jones?
I mean, if I'm understanding correctly, I think what this is, Councilman Wallace is proposing is that council just turn in what they would like their agenda items earlier. It's not necessarily asking for the office to do work faster because, as we know now, it's still a 2-day time period in which we have now. Council turns in, it was asked that council turn in everything that they would like on the agenda by Wednesday. The agenda is made and put out that Friday with the 72-hour notice. Alexante is saying that we turn, instead of us waiting until that Wednesday, that we turn it in that Monday. And within, it's still a 48-hour time period in which they've been having to.
No, actually in this one, and like I said, I mean, I could go back and rectify it, especially when we talk about meeting minutes earlier or us turning it in. But it does, on this one, say that the agenda be done by Wednesday.
And we can certainly seek to do that if that be the will of council, just, yes, Councilman Rowland. Hold on, Councilman Rowland.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it says specifically, like, everybody had to be earlier, 3 days earlier. My current issue is making sure that everyone understands the role of the city secretary. The official role, the number one thing, is the official keeper of the records for the city, so the minutes and the agenda. That's the number one role. So all these other things are ancillary, and we got to be mindful. Like, we just need to be mindful of people. But the number one role of a city secretary is to make sure we have minutes and an agenda regularly. I was in support of getting the minutes or something earlier. I just don't think that handicapping the current short staff we have with this policy is going to help us to get anywhere, because what are the what if we don't, what is going to happen if this doesn't, if we move this up? So we're moving it up from Friday to now you want to do it Wednesday, 2 days prior, and then our reports from Wednesday, and you move it to Monday. But that leaves us. So it's going to give us more time, but it's really going to cut off with our current staffing. It's not going to get us the results we want, because we're going to have less time to do it. Now, I'm saying we're going to have less things on the agenda, but the people are still going to have to go through the same process. And so I guess the intent, Councilman Wallace, was it to the intent of moving the time up? Can you state what the intent? Understanding our current city staffing.
So the intent was because there's a draft that's made, and then from the draft, Mayor Allen chooses, what goes on and what's not based on different things, and so she, from conversation with Ms. Dickey, city secretary, there were times where it was done earlier, but when agenda items were put on last second, then you can't put it out until all the agenda items. And so it will go all the way to that threshold of that 6 p.m. Friday. And so the idea is if you do it earlier, then you can push it up to the threshold of Wednesday, 6 p.m. However, it doesn't put it around the fringe of the Open Meetings Act, where now there's stress involved. And plus, whenever we get the agenda, we can ask the questions on that Thursday and Friday. It just gives time for preparation, so that whenever we come to these meetings, we are well informed and we have every ounce of information that we could have up to that point.
Which is still the 2-day time period in which we already have to turn in our agenda items and to get the finalized agenda is still to be done. It's still that 2-hour time period for them to do their due diligence, as it always has been. It just forces us to turn in our agenda items early.
And I think again, I totally agree with everything all of you are saying. I only have a question about the possibly legality of the 24 hours prior to the council meeting.
I'm in that wording.
Because there was an old thing in there that was actually on our ordinances now that's outdated. And it sounds like it might have been picked up off of that, but that was outdated. And
so maybe, like I said, this can go back to make sure the wording's correct. The 24-hour is more so if let's say some emergency happened and we needed some type of information put in our packet. This is not saying add an agenda item, 24 hours beforehand. It's saying that, already our packet's typically set on that day when the agenda is made. But let's say, as Mayor Allen found out about, Mr. Gribble and whatnot, he wants to add into our packet. That gives him the opportunity to add into our packet. Let us be Mayor, why didn't we get it on Wednesday?
So what's your motion?
Uh,
Councilman Jones?
Wouldn't we have to move this to the next agenda, the next meeting agenda anyway for, council to review?
Yeah, okay.
I move that we move, agenda item number 3, to next city council meeting, upon city council review.
Second.
You mean city attorney review?
Well, yes, sir.
Okay. It's been properly moved and seconded that item 3, discuss, consider, and take action on Code of Ordinances, Chapter 1, Section 1.514 on the agenda in terms on when to submit items for the agenda, be carried over to a subsequent meeting until city attorney review. You've heard the motion, ready for the questions? On readiness?
Could we just make sure that what we're proposing connects with our old code of ordinances about the difference between the 72 hours versus 24 hours, making sure that there's something that's congruent.
This will be the last version. This is to be the only version of what the rule is, so we can amend the code.
Okay.
Okay. Councilman Jones?
Somebody can.
My readiness, I see that we have a report of other, policy changes. So could that be added to, our next?
One of
Chapter 10.
Item 4,
item 4 is one of them.
you want to add item 4 with item 3? Because they both need city attorney review?
I want to actually discuss item 4 so we all get an understanding of it. So, I mean, because people don't want item 4, the council doesn't even want to consider it, and I want to put it on the next agenda.
Okay.
So just keep
Anybody want to call for the question?
Question.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed have the same right? Ayes have it. Item 4, discuss Code of Ordinances, Chapter 10, Section 3.01 regarding the designation of a development officer. Councilman Wallace.
Okay, so in the sheet I gave you, the second page. So I wrote 3 of them. Only 2 made it, but the second one is talking about the development officer. So I'm gonna read same thing. I'm gonna read what it originally says and the addition after it. So it says the development officer shall be the designated authority charged with the administration and enforcement of this ordinance. The mayor or a designee of the mayor shall serve in this capacity. The development officer may also serve as a staff advisor to the city council, planning and zoning commission, board of adjustment, city staff, and citizens relating to the administration, interpretation, implementation, and enforcement of the provisions of this ordinance. So this basically talks about the development officer. I was going to print out the full entity of what a development officer does, but as you already see from the ink was sad today. So, the second thing or the addition was the development officer shall be designated authority charged with the administration and enforcement of the ordinance. A designee of the mayor approved by city council shall serve in this capacity. The development officer may also serve as a staff advisor to city council, planning and zoning commission, board of adjustment, city staff, and citizen relating to this administration, interpretation, implementation, and enforcement of the provisions of this ordinance. So, the ideology is within this policy. It talks about certificates of occupancy, and that and the zoning officer work together in terms of designating which buildings are good to go and whatnot, and services out. So this one kind of just puts a check and balances because originally it said the mayor or a designated mayor shall serve in this capacity. This now puts the safeguard of saying that it's approved by city council. So we all are well aware of who it is. So whenever the question comes like who put out the certificate of occupancy, we can say we approved of it.
Is there an additional, there's additional So we're just gonna change this first section, not the other sections in 3 point.
Correct. So the section after it kind of gives the description. Like I said, I wanted to print that out, but ink was having issues with me today. So I kind of just want to put it out there because we're probably just going to do with the same thing we did with item number 3 in terms of talking about it more the next meeting, and I'll make sure we have the information for the next meeting. But it's just putting it out there so that we have an understanding of what it is in the first place.
Any other discussion? Point that I'd like to share with you. It says, section 3.01, the development officer shall be the designated authority charged with the administration and enforcement of this ordinance. Remember, these are some subsets that were in place before we became home rule. The home rule charter clearly states that the mayor is responsible for the enforcement of all city ordinances. So again, this will have to go before council and see how it sits, and then we'll go from there.
But I think part of, we have our charter, which is limited in scope, and we have our code of ordinances, which helps us to operate functionally day to day. What we're trying, what this is doing is saying we want to make sure that our court of ordinances are, one, updated because some of them have been there since 1980, but 2, we've had some questions or concerns in different situations, and we just want a clear delineation of X, Y, and Z, because we should be getting a development officer report of the ordinances and the things of that nature. I don't necessarily know how that will connect back into whether we're talking about CEOs or whether we're talking about the code enforcement officer. And so we may need to have a conversation, but I move that we move this, I move that we move agenda item 4 to our next city council meeting to discuss, consider, and take action on adopting chapter 10, section 3.01 regarding the designation of a development officer.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Item 4, discuss code of ordinance, chapter 10, section 3.01 regarding the designation of a development officer, be moved to the next city council meeting. You've heard the motion, ready for the questions? Councilman Jones.
May I make a friendly amendment that we also add Article 2, Administration, Section 2.1, Zoning Officer, to that as well, to be on the next agenda item.
Can we do that, or we need to wait till at the
Is
end?
that a compound motion?
We can't.
Well, you have a motion, and will the person who made the second accept the amendment, or the person making the motion accept the
I
amendment?
accept.
And second as well.
Second.
Second.
Okay. You've heard the motion, ready for the question. All those in favor say aye. Opposed have the same right?
So,
Ayes have it.
so do we have it, what that, we have it documented what that motion's gonna be, what's gonna be?
Yeah, we'll just, the only thing we need
The
council,
mayor is,
whoever they are, is to reiterate
right.
how this doesn't, just like our charter can't supersede state law, our ordinances can't supersede the charter.
Have to be consistent.
Okay. Are we on to item 5? Discuss, consider, and take action on a policy for agenda items to have a time limit in which each item is discussed. Councilman Jones. We've been waiting for you.
I think this is something in which our citizens as well as city council members have been wanting for what have been needing for quite some time, so that way meetings could flow better. Last meeting I rated it off for you guys and gave examples. If there is any additional questions or anyone would like for me to reread that agenda item, I did. Do not mind doing that, but I think last time we took adequate amount of time to discuss and we should be able to make a decision upon that item today.
Discussion? Now, hold on just a second. Hold on. I'm going to try to use an example from Robert's rules. If you make a motion on this, discuss, consider, and take action, then we discuss it, and then we vote, it moves. So if you want to make the motion, then we can go to the unreadiness for the discussion. If we do that on each item is going to be shorter, because if one of you feels somebody's hogging or whatever, you can say call for the questions, the discussion stops, and we vote. But that's how Robert Rules suggested, and it says is to cut down exactly what Councilman Jones is saying.
Well, once again, the issue, while that's good in theory, not for this particular item, but if we look at our agenda in totality, there are items on the agenda that we don't receive the information to until today. And so, what we're being asked to do is to put a motion on the floor and then limiting the amount of time we have to discuss absolute brand new information. Whereas if we like I discussed in the last meeting, the purpose of us going to a 2-meeting system was to spend a meeting, the first meeting of the month receiving information, the second meeting of the month acting on the information. I believe that's when the meetings become more efficient and we could actually integrate that system. But I think in the current process, for one, it limits our ability to do our due diligence, because we walk in and we have a stack of documents and we're being asked to process it and then make informed decisions on all at one time without even like Councilman Wallace he just put forward 2 great initiatives. Now I think without the level of conversation that we were just allowed to have, we wouldn't have really known exactly what these items were. And so it's not we can't call them and say, hey, tell me about this agenda item, because that's a violation of the open meetings right. And so sometimes we have to wait till we get here to receive that information before we can actually act on it. While I think it's an excellent idea, I think there are other things that we need to take. There are other pieces to the puzzle that we have to put into place at the same time. Well, if it's going to be effective, because if not, then we're going to be making rush decisions and voting on stuff that we may not fully have all the information to.
Well, what we could do, and again, that back to Councilman Wallace's point, if we have a cutoff, you shouldn't be receiving any information today. Or we do like you all did a couple meetings ago, a couple meetings in a row. If it was something you just got, you tabled it, we moved on. And again, that's efficiently. If you don't have an opportunity to absorb it, absolutely. But rather than discuss it and try to debate it when you're just getting it, let's table it for the next meeting. And again, we're moving the agenda.
So my thing with what I would like to do is call ourselves out, because upon a lot of items we could talk about what if, or that in theory that something else would work, but our job is to set policy and to make the policy work and fit to us. And so, in the past, obviously we're not the only people that was tired of sitting in 3 to 4 hour meetings, but that wasn't working for us in theory. So